Welcome to the Wolverine Digest podcast, the best spot for objective and authentic coverage of Michigan athletics. If you want open dialogue, honest opinions, and in-depth coverage of the maize and blue, this is the podcast for you. And now, here's your host, Brandon Brown, joined as always by Chris Brandler.
I just want to start by saying go blue.
Chris, it's funny, we play that little clip every time of that dude at Big Ten Media Days where he says, before he asked Harbaugh a question, he said that. And I found myself wondering, do people know that we're making fun of that, or do they think we're in with that guy?
I don't know. I feel like I've evolved. I feel like at first I was making fun of him, and now it's just become a way of life.
Yeah, I actually somehow that showed up on my feed again the other day, and I'm like, oh God, man, that guy. And I'm like, yeah, we really do have that at the beginning of every one of our podcasts.
Every single one of them. I wouldn't have it any other way. Is
that a good thing or a bad thing? All right, well, we're here on a Friday, middle of the day, a little different here, but I wanted to get a couple of guests in. I didn't even know you were going to be able to join us, Chris, so we'll start there. You got Bryler down there looking like Tony Montana, getting ready to wrap up the Florida trip. He's down there with the family, but they're flying back tonight. I can't wait for you to get back and see the foot of snow in single-digit temps. It blows outside right now.
I've been getting a lot of pictures, so I know what we're coming back to. But, man, it's been it heated up quite a bit down here towards the end of the week, and I got to be honest, we're ready to head back. It's been great. But my body, my internal thermostat, it's not ready for 90-degree weather. It's not ready for this humidity. So
I hear you. All right. Well, we've got Michael Spath coming up at some point. I gave him the 2:30 timeline, but he said he might pop in if he's got a free window earlier than that. But I'm super excited to welcome our first guest, Chris Castellani, a guy I have followed from afar for a long time. If you're in the Michigan market, if you're in the Detroit sports market, if you consume content, you know this guy. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today, man. It's nice to finally talk to you. We've shot some messages here and there, but great, man.
I appreciate you having me on. I was telling somebody the other day, this, and I'm happy to do this, and I appreciate you guys letting me on. This is my last stand for this saga. After this, I could probably go the next 6 months of my life without hearing the words Jim or Harbaugh, and I would probably be okay. I'm happy to do it. Love doing it. Happy talking about it. But after this, I am relieving myself of all Harbaugh drama after this, but I appreciate you having me on.
I believe a lot of people are in that same boat.
They have to be. It's so weird because what I do in general is very light. I blog and I make videos, and yet this entire week I was that meme of Jimmy Butler after Game 5 of the Finals where he's hunched over, the scores table. I was I spent 6 hours on 2 different Twitter spaces talking about one football coach. So it's definitely been an eventful week for sure.
Well, I'm going to sprinkle a couple of other things, and it's not going to be all Harbaugh, but that is kind of the. I mean, this whole thing, I'm with you, man. Chris and I talked about it a lot. You couldn't not talk about it, but we both got pretty sick of it. I mean, we got pretty sick of it pretty fast. We wanted some closure. We've got some closure, but now the way it happened was so bizarre and so weird and strange, and now he's back. He's going to remain Michigan's head coach. Mm-hmm. I guess I'll start right there with that. How weird was this as a big-time Michigan fan, a sports fan across all platforms, the way that this whole thing played out and came together, and now he's back. He's Michigan's coach.
In terms of weirdness, I'll quote Usher and say on a 1 to 10, it's a certified 20. This was about as bizarre a circumstance as we've seen in a while. It's very emotions run high. And what's interesting to me when it comes to Jim Harbaugh and when it comes to people's criticism of Jim Harbaugh, for the record, by the way, I'm glad, good. I hope he succeeds. Of course, I love Michigan, and last year was amazing, and I hope they build off of what they did last year. What's interesting to me is that, for people who might not know what I do, my bread and butter is Tigers stuff, right? I love the Tigers. I make videos after every Tigers game. When I criticize Al Avila or Chris Ilitch, or I'll throw out a player like a Casey Mize, right? If he doesn't pitch well, nobody bats an eyelash and accuses me of not being a Tigers fan. If I criticize Juwan Howard in the basketball program, which I've done this year, I've been relatively underwhelmed with how they performed. Nobody says, "Oh, you just hate Michigan basketball." But when you criticize Jim Harbaugh, it becomes this personal thing. It becomes this, you're not a fan of him, you don't like him, and therefore you don't like the program. That's very bizarre to me. That's the aura that surrounds him. And I fall in the middle with a lot of this stuff where like last year was awesome. And like I was, the videos I make like speak for themselves. Like I was very emotional with the way things went against Ohio State and being in Indy when they, held the trophy up and won the Big Ten championship. It was an incredible, incredible run. But I pointed out this week some stuff that bothered a lot of people, and I get it. Like it was snarky. I'm not going to act like it wasn't. But when people say stuff like, "Oh man, well Harbaugh got his pay cut in half," it's like, well, yeah, for a reason. Like people just forget 2020 and like what happened there and how unwatchable and brutal that team was. And you know what? He did an incredible job a season ago. He left his ego at the door. He brought in some really good young assistants. Mike McDonald is going to be a head coach in the NFL one day. Like that guy has it. Incredible hire. But I do think that like it's just interesting to me the way that people have reacted to this entire saga, where now that he's back, I've had people be like, "Oh, you must be mad." No, I'm not mad. I hope he wins. I hope he wins every game. But I do think that it's fair to criticize the saga, criticize the way that this whole thing went down, and also be adamant in your hope that this team wins another Big Ten championship and goes back to the playoffs. Like this is not, it's not a linear thing where you have to be on one side of the aisle or the other. I go back and forth and I fall in the middle and I try to do the best I can with my blogs and my videos. And it's been a bizarre process, but in long story short here, I'm just looking forward to them winning more games because that solves everything.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. And you wouldn't hurt my feelings one bit if you said, "Brandon, I've never watched one episode of this. I've never listened to your podcast," because literally, dude, you sound like you've listened and watched every single one. Because that's all the exact same things we say all the time. I get called a hater because I criticize Jim Harbaugh's first 6 years, which were full of critical points, in my opinion.
Right.
Again, last year was incredible. Me and Chris had the time of our lives covering that team.
Awesome.
Going to away games, going down to Florida. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, there are pictures of me my entire life as a kid adorned in maize and blue. My son is 2 and has multiple head-to-toe outfits of Michigan stuff. And yet, when I criticize the fact that he didn't do a lot of things through the first 6 years that he managed to do last year, it's the same thing. It's right. this hater, why? I want to ask you, I don't know if you know, I don't know, but why? Why is that? Why do you get that reaction? Why does anybody get that reaction when you take a completely warranted, critical approach at looking at what Jim Harbaugh's done?
Well, I think what it is that there's such a personal connection that Jim Harbaugh, the man, has to the University of Michigan that makes things a little bit different. He is a guy who played here. He's a made man. He's a guy who's been associated with this university forever. He is a guy who had a remarkable track record, when he got hired at U of M. So those, I think that there are people who come to his defense regarding that stuff that and obviously different regimes, but nobody came to Rich Rodriguez's defense, and they shouldn't have. He did a really bad job, but I think that early on, a lot of the haymakers that were kind of thrown his way were a result of the fact that he didn't have a lot of people in his corner because he didn't have those Michigan connections. Jim Harbaugh does, and it is bizarre that you, for whatever reason, you can criticize, you can not be a fan of the art and still be okay with the artist. It's a strange juxtaposition when it comes to the job he's done and him as a personality. But the thing that can be said about him and the thing that could have been said about Hoke and Rich Rod and every coach that's ever been at Michigan, the biggest problem solver is to do and I ended my last blog by saying this, that thing you did last year, do it again, and everyone's going to forget. I'm unhappy with this process. I think that I know the recruiting class was set. In terms of optics, interviewing for another job on National Signing Day is a weird move. Now what will solve that is beating Ohio State a few more times. Urban Meyer flamed out in the NFL, right? Obviously. Urban Meyer is not inherently a different person compared to what he was at Ohio State. The difference is he gets to Jacksonville and he's not winning. So people get upset about it. And all these stories come out about him being kind of abusive and him being a bad guy and doing some really, nasty things. It's not like he changed. It's just that people were more willing to not turn the other cheek because he wasn't winning the way that he was at Ohio State. And for the record, I think that Harbaugh, in terms of his track record, the way he treats his players and the way that he's treated, the staff that he's, is substantially different. Like, I do think a lot of the criticism, I put it in my recent blog, regarding Jim Harbaugh, the man, is relatively unwarranted. Like, when he got here, there was all like the satellite camps people made a huge deal about. Like,
right.
Who cares? Like, yeah, like he's a quirky guy. He likes to throw footballs around with his shirt off. So what? Like, a big deal. Like, it's a very strange circumstance with this guy that is incomparable to any other coach, I would say, really, in all sports. That Harbaugh has a microscope held up to him, and a group of defenders and a group of critics that is greater than any other coach in the world. I mean, he really is a brand of his own that will continue to, and it will continue to be that way as long as he remains at Michigan.
It's interesting you say that. Like, can you imagine if he did something actually bad?
Right,
Like,
I know.
like, legitimately bad. He just does weird shit. Like, it's not bad. It's just, yeah, like you said, he's climbing a tree. He's throwing a ball with his shirt off. He's doing weird
Right.
kind of stuff, but it's not bad. And he still is. That's an interesting point. He might be the most polarizing figure in all of sports for reasons that really don't even matter.
I can't think of any other. Maybe there is one that is like has that microscope held up to him. I don't think there is, though. Like, just thinking about it, like across all sports, I mean, like Belichick is like kind of a weird guy and said, but like I don't think he has the kind of, he's not as polarizing as Harbaugh is. It's a soap opera, and it was from day one, and it hit like it's the season finale was this week, and they left us on a cliffhanger for a few days, so it's been bizarre for sure.
Well, let's talk about this week a little bit. Obviously, he could have signed his extension at any point, really going back to the day he beat Ohio State, everybody at Michigan knew, like, we're keeping him. We're going to give him more money. Let's do that now. So really, like, going all the way back to that point, I know John Bacon had his running total, which got to like 30-ish or something like that, but it was really longer than that. Some reports have come out now that he went to Minnesota. He didn't get offered. Of course, again, these polarizing groups, you've got a Michigan group that's like, no, there's no way. That's our Jimmy. He told him no. Yeah. He flew out there, interviewed, and told him no, and came back, and it's Michigan. And like, come on, man. That's not how it happened. And if you look outside of the Michigan faction,
right,
the opinions are very different. So I'm going to assume that what happened was he went out there, things just didn't work out, and he didn't get the offer. I'm not going to say that he went out there and bombed the interview, or he freaked everyone out, or he acted like a loon. I don't think that's it at all. It's possible. I'm just saying he went out there and it didn't work out. He didn't get the offer. He's back. So my question, I guess, is, does that change anything for you as a fan? Is it weird that you see some of these fans like literally acting like they won the lottery that he's back, when it was like pretty clear he wanted to dip and just didn't get an opportunity to do so?
No, I mean, look, people are entitled to their opinions. I go back to, what I said earlier, which is everyone will forget about this saga if they go to the Horseshoe and beat Ohio State next year. Like, that's the landscape. That's the world of college sports. Like, people forgot about the first 6 years. The second, the second they beat Ohio State, that's the landscape of sports. People have short-term memories. People have selective memories. That's totally fine. Regardless of what he does, I will say that this week was a frustrating week and a frustrating look on his part. I believe that, again, the last week or so, or not even the last week, I'm sorry, the last month has kind of been a game of chicken between him and Ward Manuel. Like, he wanted the extension. Maybe he wanted more. I can't speak on that.
Yeah,
I can't, and I also can't speak on what happened in the interview. Like, who knows? I've heard a lot of different rumors, but it's hearsay, and nothing's been like confirmed. So I'm not going to do that because I don't want to slander anybody. But I think it is fair to say, based on the reporting that I heard from some really reliable sources, I believe he left Schembechler Hall. Oh my God, all the days are running together now. Wednesday. Under the belief that he would be offered by the Minnesota Vikings, and he did not get the offer. Okay, it's a bit bizarre. The one thing I will say, because I know how this works, that like if they lose or drop a game early next year, people are going to say, oh, is his heart in it? Is he thinking about the NFL? Let me tell you something. Jim Harbaugh could be coaching a 4th grade Pee Wee team, and he's going to coach it like it's the Super Bowl. Like, this is the single most competitive human being of all time. His heart will be in anything that it wants to be in. Like, I have no doubts that he's going to go 110% into every single thing that he puts into the Michigan football program from now until he either retires or decides to take another job, which I still, regardless of what he says, I still do not think is out of the question. Like, that could, I do think that could still happen. But no, what's been the most frustrating part is just the length of this. Like, you had a great momentum going. I know they got their doors blown off by Georgia. I take nothing out of that. Like, Georgia could have beaten the Lions. Like, that team was insanely talented. Like, straight, like, that team was nuts. You get to the close to the pinnacle, you get beat by a more talented team, that's fine. But you have a month in which your defensive coordinator leaves, which I think might have happened anyway, because Mike McDonald he's a stud. You lose at least one other assistant. And it's an important recruiting period, and yet there was a lot of twiddling of thumbs. And I think that, to me, is the most frustrating part. A lot of people are left in the dark. A lot of really good reporters who reported truth are unfortunately kind of left with egg on their face, not because they said anything wrong, but because Jim Harbaugh is an agent of chaos, and he's an impossible guy to report on because he changes his mind and he flips on a dime, and a lot of weird stuff happens with him. But I think it's, I go back to, I've said it a million times, the word is just bizarre. It's just the way this thing has happened. I think people have done everything they can to kind of report the truth. But sometimes even truth can become fiction as it pertains to Jim Harbaugh. And I think that's kind of the case here.
Chris, I think you said the same exact thing. It was like frustration in this month where it could have been build, momentum.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where I was at, just strictly from a fan standpoint. If you look at the energy that was in the program or within the fan base, 30 plus 40 days ago, after Indy or after Ohio State, there was nothing but positivity. And after the first 6 years of frustration, finally, when you get to that point where you've been trying to get to, from a fan standpoint, I would have liked to have seen ride that momentum, take those 30 days right after and pack as much in as you can. And I know that Jim Harbaugh was out recruiting. I know he was working his ass off for Michigan, but the reality was he was also exploring other things. I don't knock him for that. I get it. I feel like this was his last shot. He came off of his best year. There were 5 or 6 openings, and he didn't get a single offer. And so I can't imagine that that's going to happen 3 years from now or 4 years from now. So I do think this was his last shot. But I do think a lot of the frustration comes from the fact that it feels like a lot of time was squandered to capitalize on a really, really good year. But again, as Chris said, if you win, everybody's going to forget about it. The problem is if you lose, nobody's going to forget about it. Right. And this is going to keep coming up. So,
and in general, I agree with basically everything you just said. I do think that he was out recruiting. Like, he didn't stop doing his job, but at the same time, even if you are recruiting, that cloud is going to hang over you, like, no matter what. No, if you're talking to a player, these kids are smart. They're aware of the fact that even if, you're making a pitch, you're trying to bring a kid in, that stuff, like, they're aware of the fact that this is a coach who might have a different job, a month from now. And the way I look at last year and the success they had, it's very similar to the gentleman I got right there in that season, where, like, the way I look at last year's Michigan football team is very similar to how I look at that Beeline team with Trey Burke. It's, like, my favorite sports team ever. But what made that run special was the fact they sustained it. They got back to the Elite Eight, and they ended up going to the national championship 4 years after that, and winning the Big Ten tournament. They almost died and won the Big Ten tournament one year, and and then did it again the next year. I will view the Jim Harbaugh era completely differently if 5 years from now that's the only Big Ten title he's won. I think there will nationally there will be people who will look at that, his tenure as a whole, and view that season as a fluke. If he doesn't build off of it, then he'll be like those quarterbacks who only, those great quarterbacks who only won one ring in the NFL. Like, you did a good job for that one moment, but you never kept the momentum going. And I think that these last several weeks, have potentially, I'm not saying it's gonna have potentially, harmed, what could be a really solid, head of steam that they have going.
Well, perfect segue into the last football question here. Then we'll ask a basketball thing. We'll get you out of here, man. Michigan's going to start off 4-0. They're going to beat Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn by $1 billion. They're probably going to beat Maryland by $1 billion.
Yeah.
And then they got to go to Iowa for that 5th game of the season, first road game, not until October 1st. They're at home the whole month of September, which is great for tune-up and getting things ready to roll. How are they going to do next year? Incredible amount of change on defense. No Mike McDonald. Lost 3 first-rounders if you look at the latest mock. Most have Daxton Hill going late in the first round.
Yeah.
David Ojabo, Aiden Hutchinson. Tons of changes there. We'll see what happens at quarterback. The schedule is favorable. Like, they might be favored in 11 of 12 games next year. How do they do next year? And then you said, I thought that was an amazing point. If this is the only Big Ten title he wins over the course of 12 seasons, like, that's going to mean something. So micro next year, macro, however long he decides to stay. What do you see?
My prediction is that I think truly next year, if they're subject to change, injuries will play a factor potentially. And teams come out of nowhere sometimes, but if they're not 10-1 going into the horseshoe, like, what are we doing? I mean, like, I'm sorry, like, okay. And Michigan State, I think Mel Tucker's doing a wonderful job. I don't believe they're going anywhere, but like, they got to replace a Goliath in Kenneth Walker. Like, that's going to be tough for any program. And I think he'll get there, and I think he's going to do a wonderful job. But, Michigan's playing at home. They're going to be pissed after the last 2 years. Like, I think the schedule, like you said, is very favorable because I think this defense is going to have a lot of struggles early on. I don't care if you're Alabama. But if you have 2 defensive ends who gave you 25 sacks in a season, that's tough to replace. Like, straight, including a guy who was the Heisman runner-up in Aiden Hutchinson. Micro, my expectation is not win the Big Ten next year. I would say if you have that 10-2, next season, if you lose or 11-1, whatever it is, that's all right. To me, where this thing would potentially not go off the rails, but would become a major disappointment again is. My fear is that J.J. McCarthy leaves the program and we look at him the way that we looked at DPJ or Nico Collins and say, God, this guy was so talented, and they didn't utilize him enough. Like, I maybe it's too high of expectations, but like, you look at the Michigan passing records at this school for a single season, they kind of suck. Like, Chad Henne,
just to further your point, Shea Patterson was here for 2 seasons. Yeah. And I think he's in the top 5 in most of the statistical categories. It's up there along with guys like, Greasy and Brady. So, I mean, it's wild when you look at it. That's a great point.
It's funny because everybody says that Shea Patterson was awful, and yet, like, you look at a lot of, like, the big Michigan passing games of all time or the most productive Michigan passing seasons, he's up there in, like, at least the top 10, if not top 5. Like, Chad Henne holds the Michigan record for passing touchdowns in a season. He broke it his freshman year with 25. Dwayne Haskins threw 50. Justin Fields threw 25 by like September 17th 2 years ago. Like it's really, that's a bad look. So what worries, I think that where people's patience will start to wear thin is if you have what a lot of people, and myself included, I'm really big on JJ. I think he's going to be very good. If those guys leave the program without another Big Ten title, without some records broken, without really opening up the offense in a way that fits, 2022 football, because like last year was wonderful and it was great. I am under the belief that if you run it back with this same offensive scheme, I don't know if they can do again what they did this year. I mean, they won the Ohio State game and the Iowa game and so many other games because they imposed their will at the line of scrimmage and ran the ball really well. In general, for the most part, there are exceptions. Teams that win national championships and consistently win conference championships in college football don't do that. Like Burrow at LSU didn't do that. Tua didn't do that. Trevor Lawrence didn't do that. Like, I think that what worries me is that they look at last year as this template when in reality what they should be doing is building off of that and expanding the offense to a point that kind of pushes you into the 21st century and beyond.
I'm going to bring Michael in. He's here. Michael, hopefully the audio is working. I saw you messing with a headset a little bit. I think it's probably all right, though. We got you over there?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys can hear me, I can hear you fine. I just, I put the headphone on because I was like, Brandon's got his headphone on, but then I looked like a pretty big dork with my headphones on. So
I might too. I don't know. I mean, I might as well. I wanted to bring you on because everything Chris just said, Mike, you and I have talked about a billion times. The the 25 touchdown passing record at Michigan, there were, if my memory serves, because I looked this up, but it's been a while. I think there were 45 quarterbacks in the country last year who threw more than 25 touchdowns in the season, and that's still Michigan's record all time. I'm with you, Chris. J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, Andrell Anthony. This crop of offensive talent, the other young receivers, has to do something more than that. They have to get in the record books. They've got to win big. So we'll kind of fade Chris out and bring Mike in here. But Mike, the stuff Chris just said about bringing the offense into 21st century, and if you're not 10-1 going into Columbus next year, and the macro picture of winning another Big Ten title or two, you and I have also talked about this before. Where do you fall on all of that when we start to look at Jim Harbaugh might be a lifer, and if he gets to year 12 and it's still just this one season where he really did all these things that we've expected him to do, what does that all look like big picture and in the next year, and just all of that moving forward now that he's back?
Well, can I just say I'm really glad to see that you're still wearing your grunge sweatshirt.
Dude, okay. I wore this just for you because I knew you were coming on. Mike, Chris, both Chris's. Mike used to make fun of me so bad for wearing this shirt on the radio. I would show up to the studio and he just couldn't believe that it even existed. So
I can see why.
I couldn't believe that he was an adult. Although, I mean, Brandon and I go way back, but I'm not jealous of you. I am jealous of your partner, Chris, who seems like he's in the Florida sun right now.
He is.
Yeah, I'm staring out here looking at this blanket of snow in my backyard. So Chris, I'm super jealous of you, and you look like you're living like the Jimmy Buffett life right now.
Living the dream, man. Tommy Bahama.
Okay. Well, to answer your question, Brandon, by the way, 26 quarterbacks in 2021 threw for more than 25.
I was way higher, but still, it's a lot.
Well,
it's a lot.
I think what your stat was is that I think 46 threw more than Cade did, which I think.
Maybe that's what it was.
I think that might have been the stat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll even say this, and look, last year, and I agree with other Chris here.
We got two Chris's, yeah. Chris and whatever. Chris and Christopher.
I thought what you said was so prophetic, and what scares me a little bit, Chris, is that Michigan will try to take what they did in 2021, repeat it over and over again, and think that that's the winning formula to be successful. And I did a stat. I looked this up during the season. I was really intrigued because at one point, Cade McNamara had thrown 8 touchdown passes, and they were through 10 games or something ridiculous. And I went and looked it up, and it was the average. You took the last 10 Big Ten championship teams, and you threw one Wisconsin team out because they had 3 starting quarterbacks. They only won because they ended up facing, I think, Nebraska in the championship game when it was the legends and leaders.
And Ohio State and Penn State had sanctions on them, so they got in by default.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So if you took that one out, so you look at the other 9 seasons of Big Ten champions, the starting quarterback had averaged something like 17 touchdowns in the first 6 games of the season, and Cade McNamara was sitting there with like I said, 5 or 6 or something like that at the halfway point. And so Michigan, really give them a lot of credit because they figured out a formula that was going to work for them. It worked for them in the biggest game of the year against Ohio State. Ohio State also had a tragically one of its worst rush defenses of the last 20 years. And, Ryan Day, you look at the moves he's made in the offseason, I guarantee you that next year Michigan can't run for 300 yards against Ohio State, that they're going to have to win a game like you see consistently across college football today, like you see, a national. Look, Georgia also kind of won that way this year in a what we consider a rarity, but they also had. I mean, where would you rank that defense in the last 20 years of college football? In the top 5?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's. I think that's the part that scares me is they're going to come back and they're going to say, look, I love Blake Corum and I love Donovan Edwards, and I think that these guys are superstars, but they got to be using Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum the way that they did towards the end of the season where they're throwing the ball out of the backfield a ton. If they're trying to run these 2 guys and whoever else emerges as the third running back, the same way that they ran Hassan Haskins in this offense in 2021, I just don't think that gives you long-term success. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to be wrong. I've been wrong before. Not as much as Brandon, but I'm certainly, I'm willing to be, but I just think you got to start playing football like we're in 2022. And that offense really should be about J.J. McCarthy and Ronnie Bell and Roman Wilson and Andrell Anthony and Luke Schoonmaker, who really came out as a tight end towards the end of the year, and who Donovan Edwards as a running back out of the backfield, and Blake Corum, like that's what the offense should be in 2022.
And just to add to that, like the one thing, despite how insane the saga has been, that like this is going to be in 2022 the most talent that Michigan has had on offense in, dude, you could say, a decade or two. I mean, the amount of guys returning, you lose Haskins and you lose some pieces off the offensive line, but every meaningful receiver and tight end and quarterback returns. Like, so I share those sentiments that like, I do think there's a whole lot to build off of here offensively. And yes, the defense is going to take a hit. They're losing a lot of talent, but I'm with you completely that like, there's so much talent returning that it does, like, it excites you, the idea that what if they do open this up? Like, what can they have? And I put this in my blog too. Like, Jim Harbaugh has never had a 1,000-yard receiver. Like, Michigan football, even at their most archaic, had 1,000-yard receivers like all the time with Braylon and David Terrell and Anthony Carter. Like, you really got to expand things and stay true to the kind of speed and space principle that Josh Gaddis has been abiding by since he arrived in Ann Arbor.
All right, Chris.
I wanted to say, because you brought the point up. Do you think that Michigan is more likely to open up the offense because of what we're talking about with the defense? That likely, there's going to be some growing pains on the defensive side. And if you want to win some football games, you're going to have an offense that's putting points on the board.
It's possible.
Do you think that the defense is going to lead to Michigan opening up the offense?
I hope so. I think that there will, because I think it's true that next year they're going to have to, they're going to have to get into some sprints with some teams. Like, this is not going to be a defense that's going to be, holding teams to 10, 15 points a game. I mean, they're going to have to win some long, like 35, 38 games. I hope that's the case. I don't know. I mean, I really do. That is my fear, is like they look at, and Michael just brought it up, that they look at last year and they're like, this is the way to do it. If we continue doing this, this is how, we're going to continue to win Big Ten titles. That's kind of what happened to Don Brown, where you had that tremendous defense in 2016 with the blitz packages, and he stuck to that for so long and never adjusted. And that era, that tenure with him as the D coordinator completely fell apart. I hope that doesn't happen. And I don't think it will, simply because I think that Jim Harbaugh as a competitor is too good to allow it to happen long term. But it's a legitimate question for sure.
Chris, I think you're a smart guy. I agree on the surface with everything you just said. But you said they're gonna have to get into some shootouts with some teams, and I gotta say they're not.
Yeah.
Just go back and look at their schedule. Go back and look at their 2022 schedule. Who is going to get in a shootout with them in the first 7 weeks of the season? Colorado State ain't. Hawaii, UConn, Maryland. Maryland continues to be a team that really is a 6-6 team at peak. Going to Iowa, that's not Iowa's game. At Indiana, if the Hoosiers can bounce back a little bit, but now everybody's kind of down on Indiana. Penn State, the seventh game of that season. I mean, they lost Dotson. They haven't been able to develop a running game.
Yeah.
What will the quarterback situation look like? They could go the first 7 games without ever having to get into a shootout with anybody. And if they do that, then you might find them saying like, well, the formula from 2021 is working again, and so we're just going to stick with this formula. And I know that Brandon and I talked about it all year and come on saying like at some point they're going to have to throw the football for 350, 400 yards. And the game that they did have to was Michigan State. They did have to throw it for, especially when you saw the following week, Purdue go out there and throw the ball for 500 yards. Right. And Ohio State beat Michigan State by throwing the ball for 400 yards in the first half. That was the game where they needed to throw the ball and throw the ball and throw the ball. It's great that Cade McNamara had a career high, 343 yards, but it was a game that they needed to throw the ball for 450.
Yeah.
And it was the one time where they got burned on it. But you look at their schedule right now, I mean, they can win 10 games next year without ever getting into a shootout and just playing the same type of ball control offense they just had in 2021.
That's true. The point I was making, to be honest with you, all pertain to Ohio State, where it's like next year, Ryan Day will never. I could be wrong. I don't see Ryan Day like just forgetting to recruit top tier talent at the front 7 ever again. Like I just don't think that they're going to win that game the way that they won it last year. So that was mainly what I was talking about. And yeah, you're right. Cade's like signature. I think he had like 380 something in that game. Like he was slinging it. Now Michigan State's secondary, Michigan State was really good last year, but that secondary was Swiss cheese. I mean, he was, the guy looked like Patrick Mahomes for like that entire game. But yeah, no, you are right. It's just that, but that's also been the issue with a lot of Harbaugh teams is you have those 10-1s, you have those like 9-2s going into Ohio State, and you can't outscore them. You ran into a situation last year where you could just dominate them on really both lines. I mean, both the offensive and defensive lines. I would be surprised if that continues, if that becomes a trend going forward.
Mm-hmm. All right, Chris, we're north of 30 minutes now, so you can speak on this last question as long as you would like.
Okay.
I said we would sprinkle a little bit of this in here, and you brought it up a little bit ago. Juwan Howard, Michigan basketball. I'm just going to ask you flat out. You can say as much or as little as you want. Is that a tournament team?
Right now, I would say no. And the reason for it is not because of talent, because I think they have talent. It's not because of coaching, because I think they have good coaching and a good staff. A big reason for it, to be completely honest, is the fact that they're playing, because of the COVID reschedulings, a lot of games in a very short amount of time. And last year's team was stacked, and that team got gassed. I mean, that's why I took nothing out of like the whole, Illinois hanging up a paper banner for that. Like, it's like they had to play like 5 games in like 13 days. I mean, that was a very, tired team going into the Big Ten tournament. And this year's team is not nearly as deep. They aren't nearly as good defensively. I would say no right now. What makes me sad is that I think at the end of the year, we're going to look at this team and we're going to say, God, you know what? I think that team's all right. I think they could have made a run. The fact is, when we're talking about the NCAA tournament, who you are at the end of the year means nothing. What matters is what your resume looks like. And they just put themselves so far behind the 8 ball with the UCF loss and the Minnesota loss. And Seton Hall's pretty good, but you had an 11-point lead against Seton Hall in the second half and lost. Those are the ones that are going to come back to bite them. Losing to Michigan State at the Breslin sucks, but Michigan State's really good. Those aren't the losses that kill you. What the losses that kill you are the ones that you should have had and didn't. And then they had the COVID problem. So right now I lean towards no, which is frustrating because I believe in the players a lot. And I think Juwan is doing an excellent job. But they're a little bit too far behind at this point, and they got to do a lot of catch up. And it starts by this Saturday by going on the road against what is, I believe, far and away the most talented team in the Big Ten in Purdue. Like, you're going to have to, if you want to make the tournament, win a game, not just at home, but probably on the road against a team with more talent than you have. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. I hope they do, man. I love Michigan basketball, but I'm skeptical at this point because of the way things have gone up to this point in the season.
What a hater!
I know, right?
Chris, I was gonna put it up there. I didn't because you brought it up on your own. But I just want to give everybody a chance to hate out there. This is the tweet that you referred to. I mean, look at all that. Look how much he's hating on Jim Harbaugh. Everybody,
my goodness!
I love that you put that out there, and that's actually what made me think I'm having him on the pod this week. I grabbed that tweet and I quoted it. And I said, "Be careful, Chris. Be careful. People don't like facts, man. They don't like them."
Yeah, and look, there was an element to that was like relatively tongue in cheek, but there was at the same time, like, good satire is based in fact. Like, there was so many things about that were true, that did happen, and I know how this works. That if they win the Big Ten next year, people are going to take that tweet and do like the hot takes exposed. But the fact is, like, those things did happen. But it doesn't mean I'm not rooting for the program or the coach or the players. Like, that's the difference is I said this after the Ohio State game is like, what I love being is wrong sometimes. I love, like, my brand is skepticism. That's just how I am. Like, I'm like that all the time with all my teams. But like, to have a team that proves you wrong, that surprises you, I hope they do what they did this year a million times, and I hope they get back to the playoff and win a bunch of playoff games. Nothing would make me happier. But people do forget, like, there was a reason why he got his pay cut in half. And I felt like I had to remind some people, but yeah.
There you go. Chris Castellani joining us for 38 more than we said he would do, but I knew we would all get rolling and have a bunch of stuff to say. So
I'm a talker guy. So like 20 minutes means 40 in my book. So you guys are totally fine.
I just got to give a shout out to Chris for, he has Trey Burke behind him, but the one that I'm really impressed with is the 1984 Detroit Tigers.
Of course.
Picture there, man. Because I don't know how old Chris is, but I think he's younger than me. And I don't know if he's
all
alive.
of us. Yes.
Yeah, I'm 26. Yeah.
Okay, so he wasn't alive for the World Series, but
right.
But that's a great picture behind you there. So
and I appreciate it. The dream goal is that at some point this background is filled with the next one. The AJ Hinch led World Series Detroit Tigers. That's the dream. But I appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you very much. This was a lot of fun, and we'll be in touch, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Chris. Rose to fame covering the Tigers on. I was gonna say you've got like 2-minute video clips on Twitter. How do you do that, man? I feel like I would have so much more to say. And you
I do. I got it down to a science now because I would ramble. Like that's been the best thing ever because I talk too much, and when you have that window, that's actually a good thing. So
there you go.
I've been able to be successful with that. But thank you guys very much. Have a great weekend. Relax. It's been an exhausting week, so I appreciate it, brother. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Chris Castellani, everybody. Thank you so much for the time. And now, Michael Spath, good friend of mine. I think, dude, we're on episode. This is podcast episode number 102, and I think this is your first. Is that right? Or did you come on one of the early ones? Maybe I can't remember.
I might have come on an earlier one. I think I've been with this Chris before. So
yeah, because I distinctly remember my 9-3 prediction, 9-3 regular season prediction. I was accused of wearing the maize-colored glasses by one Michael Spath. Turns out I underestimated him.
Man.
You did. I mean, if we want to revisit preseason predictions, I went with 6-6. So
that was at 7-5.
I'm going to qualify that because I don't think anybody should listen to a single thing I have to say the rest of the episode here.
All right. Well, this is what I was going to ask first, Mike. My first question out of the gate is, how does it feel to have zero sources? Like when you're out there trying to, give your opinion and you have no idea what you're talking about. How do you do it, dude? How do you do it?
Well, Brandon, I know you're being sarcastic, and I don't know if that's the tone you want to actually take. I thought I was coming on a serious podcast. Or you
did,
yeah. Oh,
apparently he hasn't watched the 102 episodes. There ain't nothing serious about.
Yeah, look. At the end of the day, I mean, there are, as I've told you before, there are deities in the media that people, choose for whatever reason to buy everything that they have to sell, and so a lot of times fans believe that 1 or 2 or 3 people are the only people with any type of information. And the only thing I'd say is I spent 20 years in sports media covering the University of Michigan. If you were to ask most Michigan hockey people, if you go talk to Brian Cook of MGO Blog, I mean, he said this repeatedly, literally no one has the sources that I do in Michigan hockey. And so if you understand that, I think it's a little bit crazy to suggest that I have also not developed sources for Michigan football or Michigan basketball or other things. And I'll tell you something too, and I'm not trying to, because I don't like to get into this very much, but I teach at the University of Michigan. I've taught the last 4 semesters. I have a ton of guest experts from all walks of life come to my class and talk to my class. I also have over the last 4 semesters, about 40 to 50% of my students have been student athletes of every sport, and I have developed a lot of relationships. And so, I guarantee you this, that when I post something on a message board or I put it on Twitter, I'm not shooting from a place of like, hey, I'm just guessing what's going on. Like, this is all stuff that I have been told by a lot of a lot of those just sources, and I treat them as confidants. And like, you're never going to hear me tell you like who the football players were in my class. Like, I'm not going to share any of that with you. I'm not going to tell you like who was in my class, who was talking to me, who my sources are. That's just the way that it goes. That's how you get the information. But I heard a lot. I mean, the last couple of weeks, I've heard so much about how this went down. I've heard from players on the team in the last 2 days. And one of the things that I shared just recently on a message board was, when Jim Harbaugh got on that plane and going to Minnesota, one of the players that I've become close to said kind of like, just like, F him, we're gonna rally together for Michigan. We're gonna rally together for our teammates, for our the coaches that are here, and for that Block M essentially thing, because they all thought he was gone and they all thought that he kind of left them high and dry. And so I bring that up. I don't want to get into a whole like, did Jim Harbaugh do this or did Jim Harbaugh do that? But I think at the end of the day, what you have to understand is there were a lot of really, really hurt feelings in that locker room and in that Schembechler Hall. And I also talked to another former Michigan coach earlier today, and I said, what is this offseason going to be like? And he's like, this is the most challenging offseason of Jim Harbaugh's career. And I said, you mean it like Michigan? He's like, no, anywhere he's ever been. This is the most challenging offseason he's ever had. He's like, because he has to get a locker room of at least some guys to trust him again. And he's like, and if a head coach doesn't have the trust of his team, he's kind of that's going to unspool the whole thing. And so he's like, he's got to regain the trust. And he said he can do it. I'm not questioning that he can do it. He's like, but there's a lot of bruised egos, and people are going to have to be, sacrificed, and people are going to have to step aside and say, hey, I'm going to put my pride over here, and I'm going to focus on what I need to focus on. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I'm rooting for Michigan. I'm rooting for the players, and I'm rooting for Jim Harbaugh to be successful, because he is the coach that ultimately is determining Michigan's success. So, I don't like the way that necessarily went down the last couple of days, but here we are, and we're just gotta, he doesn't owe me anything. I'm a fan, right? Like, I'm a fan. He doesn't owe me anything. I don't have season tickets. I don't donate a ton of money to the University of Michigan. So he doesn't owe me anything, but he certainly owes that locker room some honesty, some transparency, and he's going to have to soothe over some of those really, fractured relationships.
Yeah. And see a couple people in the comments bringing it up, and it's, it's not something we need to spend a ton of time on, because I agree with you. I mean, it's done now at this point. What's done is done. However it played out, however bizarre it was, however long it dragged out, it was weird. It was strange, but he's back, and he gave an interview to Mitch Albom, which we talked a little bit about that earlier today, Mike, and how that kind of transpired and how that came about and why it was Mitch, and whatever. People who have been around long enough probably understand that. But Jim Harbaugh all but confirmed in that story that he went out there thinking he was getting the job and wanting the job, and they didn't reciprocate. I mean, he massaged the language a little bit, but it was basically, I want them, they didn't want me. That's pretty much what it was. I asked Chris this earlier. I've talked to I was going to say Chris. I'm so glad I didn't. Chris Castellani, I asked him, that was one of the first things I asked him. Chris and I have talked about it on many other episodes before. Does it matter? Does it matter that it went down like that? Because Michigan's going to start 4-0 next year, and they're going to outscore their opponents like 200-0, and they're probably going to be favored in 11 games out of the 12-game schedule. So winning cures a lot of ills. Does it matter at all that it went down like it did, and that he does have some fences to mend, and that there are some people who did take it personal and some of the comments out there were like every swear word, every name calling in the book. I mean, some of his most loyal followers, and Mike, I know you know plenty of them, were calling him every name in the book because he was gone and he was out the door, and now he's back. Does it really matter? When fall rolls around, does it matter?
No, it won't. Well, I should say this. It won't probably matter to the fans, right? Like, at the end of the day, the fans are only going to care about the product that gets put on the football field. And if he's winning, if he's 4-0, as you said, if they go to Iowa and win that game in Iowa City, probably a night game in Hawkeye Stadium, and he's 5-0, and he does the things that he, he's capable of doing, and this team comes together, and then fans are going to forgive him. I think if you look at, quite a few message boards and Twitter, fans have already forgiven him. They're already to move.
A lot have, yeah.
Yeah, and people that 24 hours earlier were calling him, every name that you can, that you told your parents you never say out loud. They were calling him, and then 24 hours later, like, he's my coach, like, way to go, coach, and all this different stuff. And it's like, so fans forgive really quickly. The bigger question is like, what does this do for the locker room? Like, how quickly will they forgive him? Will this lead to any type of disruption? Again, they could have 85 pissed off football players. They're still going to start the season 4-0. But if they have 85 pissed off football players, maybe they don't win that game in Iowa. Maybe they lose again to Penn. They lose to Penn State. They lose to Michigan State. Like, that's the type of thing that they're going to have to fix. But no, I mean, fans are going to forgive. I think the one thing that fans want, and I keep on seeing this over and over again, is they want a big buyout because they want to know this is done, right? They want to know this is Dalians is over with. Like, are you for Michigan? Are you, like, especially when Jim Harbaugh has a lot of, his phrases and his sayings like, oh, enthusiasm unknown to mankind. And when he's going to repeat Bo Schembechler with the team, like, those things are going to fall on deaf ears now. Like, people are just going to kind of laugh about them. They're not going to buy that type of stuff in, but really they just want to know that, like, he's here for Michigan for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And they want to know that he's not going to do this again, because at the end of the day, I mean, this was such an amazing season. I mean, I sat there in the crowd with my brother, watching Michigan beat Ohio State with the sun, with the snow falling down, watched the game the next week, the excitement leading up to the Orange Bowl and the championship, the semifinal game against Georgia, like all that stuff was so cool. And then over the last month, it has really sucked to be a Michigan fan, right? Like, like any way you slice it or dice it, this has sucked as a Michigan fan. Watching this go down, you add in like the players that you lost that, you're expected to lose, Aiden Hutchinson and some of these guys, but then Dax Hill and David Ajabo and Chris Hinton goes, and you're like, well, this really kind of stinks. And then this Jim Harbaugh thing is just hitting you over and over and over again in the gut, or for us men, like it's hitting you in the balls over and over and over again. And it just didn't feel very good. And instead of like being able to sit back and like relish what this season has been, instead we've been infighting and people calling each other names and trashing Harbaugh and talking about how the momentum has been squandered, all this different stuff. And so, like, I just want to get back as we turn the calendar into February. I just want to get to a place where, like, we can enjoy what took place in 2021 and be excited about what's to come in 2022.
Yeah, I do. I want to ask a question because you brought it up. And you're right. A lot of fans want reassurances that this isn't going to happen again. And you're right. Harbaugh doesn't owe them that, but I think he does probably owe the University of Michigan that at this point, and that's probably going to be reflected in whatever extension he signs. But my question to you, Michael, is given that it didn't happen for him this time around, he's been with Michigan now for 7 years. There were a whole host of jobs that opened up in the NFL, and it seems like he didn't get an offer from any of them. Regardless of what he wants to do and how much he wants to scratch that Super Bowl itch, do you think the NFL is done with Jim Harbaugh? Even if Harbaugh might not be done with them, there isn't a place, at least in the head coaching position, for Jim Harbaugh in the NFL.
I mean, head coaching position, yeah, I would say so. I mean, look, the Oakland Raiders or the Las Vegas Raiders, supposedly were the perfect fit, and they ultimately went a different direction. Stephen M. Ross, as close as he is to Jim Harbaugh, he's really, really never made a major play for Jim Harbaugh. Even this, this coaching cycle, Minnesota expressed an interest. Ultimately, we don't know exactly what went down. We've had some reporters say like, well, they didn't, he came in there and he thought he was getting the job, and they didn't really like the way that this or that went. But we're not really going to know. But I'll tell you this: I mean, NFL people talk. Right. And I imagine that there's going to be some talk about like, hey, Harbaugh's not a right fit or anything like that. I don't know who gives them. I don't know who gives them that job. And I think when you look at like who's getting a lot of these new positions, I mean, it's offensive coordinators, it's younger guys. Everybody's trying to find the next McVay. Everybody's trying to find like, the Bruce Arians of the world who are, 70 years old are dinosaurs in the NFL. And they're trying to find like the next hot hand. And Jim's getting, he's not 35. He's not 40 years old. He's not 45. He's not 50. I mean, like, so I think his time probably has passed. And so I don't know that unless he actively really goes after it, that we're going to see this again. And I would say this: if he actively went after it again in a year or 2 years, if I was Ward Manuel, I'd fire him on the spot. Because I would say, look, man, like you just told me 2 years ago, like I'm here for at Michigan for as long as you want me. And now you're doing this again. Like, no, we're done with this. I don't think it'll come to that. I honestly truly believe that because of the circumstances, Chris, you just kind of laid out there. I think we're done. I really do. I think that was the end. I think the moment that Jim Harbaugh steps away from Michigan is because he retires from Michigan. That's the only scenario I see unfolding here in the next decade.
Yeah, I agree. I think whether he actually like fully heartfelt meant those words that he said, I don't think it matters. I don't know if an offer is ever going to come from the NFL if it didn't this year. And like you said, he can't do it again. He cannot do this again. He simply cannot. So I don't know what the new deal is going to look like, or what that buyout is going to look like, or if it's I've always wondered about this. Like, the buyout can be handled by anyone who wants to make it work. I mean, if that's the NFL team, if it's the college wanting to get rid of a guy, Hell, even if the coach wants to take care of it himself, I don't think that happens very often, but it could. So I'm curious to see if they have, something in there that's like, okay, well, we don't have to pay you anything, but if an NFL team wants you, they got to pay this much, or it could be this much, or how the wording is, or what it might end up looking like. But I agree, Michael. I think it's done. I think that was it. I think he flew out there. He was ready to take that job. Whatever happened, happened, and he's back. And so now it's looking forward, and it's trying to make, all that stuff that you guys talked about earlier. I was just like, I was just cringing the whole time, because it's like they're really going to come out and run the ball like 700 times through the first 5 or 6 games, and we won't even know if JJ's right arm works or whoever. I assume it's going to be JJ, but we'll see. But yeah, they're not going to have to throw it even 15 times against UConn and Hawaii and Colorado State, and probably not even. They beat Maryland by 40 at Maryland this year.
Just because you don't have to do it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And that's, I think, and
all 2021. We said that so many times.
Right. And I think Brandon and I don't know where you stand on this, Michael, but again, Michigan was winning, obviously, the early part of the season in 2021. And Brandon and I found ourselves like still walking away from the games. And I'm sure you know this because you talk to him a lot, frustrated about the way it looked and walking away, of the belief that this can't win on the biggest stage. Like, you're going to have to open it up. And so for me, I've always looked at those first 4 games as like trying to stretch it, trying to see what you can do rather than just doing what is going to work, right? I mean, is there something to that? Do you think that it's more advantageous to spend the time during those initial games really opening up the offense and seeing what it's capable of? Or do you like the idea of keeping something in the back pocket? And if you can beat the shit out of a team by running it 50 times, you just do that.
Oh, I know Mike's answer on this one.
Oh man, you just opened up my Pandora. I can't.
Was it the golden playbook, the hidden playbook that stays in the vault until the end of the year?
We're just going to keep it. We're just going to keep it vanilla because we don't need to unveil the entire playbook until we need to. And then you get to like week 10, and you're like, when are they going to unveil this playbook? Like then they're against Ohio State, and I'll tell you what, they played Ohio State. They didn't unveil. They weren't keeping like 40% of the playbook all season long for that Ohio State game. They were running the exact same things that they ran against Washington to some degree in week 2 and week 3. So no, it's interesting. And by the way, I was just looking at the schedule. Can we just get Connecticut off the calendar? Like Connecticut should not even be a Division I football team at this point. Like, what is Michigan doing playing them next year?
Fighting Jim Mora Juniors, dude. Jim Mora.
That schedule is just off. Colorado State, Connecticut, Hawaii. Like, how do you sell season tickets next year?
Yeah, that's real bad.
Oh, awful. No, I don't. I think you run the playbook from week 1. Whatever you want to have in week 12, you run in week 1 so that you get really, really good at it. That's how I've always felt about it. I don't think you hold back because, I've had so many former players tell me there's a humongous difference between the old State Street versus Main Street, right? And what you practice, behind the scenes, you just can't pull it out and play against, big boys when you absolutely need it. That's just not how it works. You got to develop confidence. You got to develop chemistry in the passing game. We saw it with Shea Patterson a couple of years ago and Nico Collins. Like, they weren't completely on the same page. He kept on having to wait for Nico kept waiting for Shea Patterson the ball to get there. Now, if they threw the ball to Nico Collins 4 or 5 times a game beyond 20 yards, don't you think that by like week 3 or week 4, Shea Patterson's dropping them in there every time and getting in a good spot? I mean, Joe Burrow a couple years ago threw 60 touchdowns, right? And Jamar Chase had like one of the most ridiculous seasons you've ever seen anybody have. Is that because they were practicing all the time or because they would get into games and he was throwing him the ball 15 times a game? I mean, like, that's how they develop that type of chemistry, because there's a difference between going at your own cornerback in practice and going against a guy who's actually jamming you, who's actually getting in your face, who's actually running with you stride for stride the entire time. So no, I'm a big believer that you gotta do everything from week 1 or from early on in the season to get ready for later in the season. And so it's I hope it's JJ. I think if it's a Cade McNamara offense, I think you're going to see a lot of what we just saw this past year. I think if it's a JJ McCarthy offense, maybe you let him open it up a little bit because the kid has that type of talent and he has the NFL dreams and all that. But I'll say this: I don't expect to see it happening until it happens. And it's funny you guys said, like, last year as you were watching the game. So are you a product or a process person? Have you ever heard that phrase before, like a product or a process person? The product person is only satisfied when they get to the end and they've accomplished something. And the process person is the person who appreciates the work that goes into it. So I'm a product person. Mm-hmm. And so when I watched Michigan football last year, I could, when the game was over with and they had won another game, I could be like excited and happy as a fan. But since I wasn't a process person, it would drive me insane to watch the games a lot of times because of the fact that it was run. And they wouldn't take advantage of their opportunities in the passing game. Late in the year against Ohio State, some of the play calling that they used, that funny fake, that reverse to AJ Henning, some of the things that they did, the pass against Iowa, the Donovan Edwards pass, like that was really clever, and I really enjoyed it. But during the season, I mean, were you truly like enjoying watching Michigan run the ball 70% of the downs, or was it kind of driving you crazy? They're like, why aren't you throwing to this guy? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? I got to say, I just don't want to go through that as a fan again. Like, I want to be able to enjoy the process and enjoy the product.
Yeah. I mean,
good point.
It's hard. I mean, dude, Mike, I'm with you 100%. And me and Chris had this back and forth so often where we'd come away from the game and be like, good God, dude, they just won by 24 points. And here we are bitching. And now they're 12-2. And we're still like, where's the fun? Where's the, it's like, what kind of fans are we? What kind of analysts are we? What kind of, whatever it's hard to do that, but I'm with you. And we would say this so often. I mean, it sucks because Michigan they would have just won the game. I think they beat Washington by 28 points or something like that. They were beating teams by a lot. They beat Wisconsin by a lot at their place. But then you'd flip over to another game and you're watching an offense and you're like, that looks like a different sport. It literally looks like a different sport. And you can't complain when the W's are stacking up. You can't, but I'm with you on that. And I wanted to return back to the practice thing and the secret playbook and the getting ready for the games and kind of tying all this together. I don't think anybody would consider us high-level athletes, right? Us three right here. But we have played sports before. And Mike, you and I have coached before together and separately. You can't recreate practice. You can't recreate game situations in practice. It doesn't matter how hard you try. It doesn't matter if you go ones versus ones. It doesn't matter if you put tons of incentives out there, if you put punishments out. It doesn't matter. You can't get there. So I'm with both of you on your sentiments, like open it up, air it out, do everything you want to do. Sure, you're going to get better at stuff as the year goes on. So it's naturally going to evolve and change a little bit and look a little different. And maybe a play you saw, and the football's a copycat thing. Maybe a play you saw in week 2 from another school, you start implementing it and you use it in week 5, whatever. Chris is a legitimate basketball player back. Do you know that guy, Chris? Who's that guy?
What's that?
Oliver? Chris was a pretty legitimate basketball player back in the day.
I was okay. I mean, my game's a lot like Robert Ory. I just kind of camp out 3-point line. I can't slash to the hole. I can't move like I used to. But, the older you get, the game of basketball, it comes easier to you because it's more cerebral. You get it.
I agree 100%, Chris. And I'll say this. Brandon Brown's wife is actually quite a fantastic basketball player. Played in college.
The better athlete of the two, for sure. There's no question.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like, if you go follow her on Instagram, like in the summer, she'll be posting pictures of her, like, dropping some really cool, basketball shots and the whole thing.
Should it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember what the question was or what the point was.
Well, the offense.
Well, Brandon, I'm getting paged. I'm getting paged back to the pool by Mom. I think she needs me for something. So okay. I'm going to hop off. Spaz, it was good.
We're getting ready to wrap up here anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully we're able to catch up. I'll let you guys kind of finish it out, but it was good catching up with you, man.
Thanks a lot, Chris. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
All right, man. Take care.
So, it's funny, and I know that someone's going to be like, well, 8th grade basketball isn't the same as college football, the whole thing. But I used to have a kid who in practice, like how you have to shoot free throws, and if you don't make certain many free throws, you have to run suicides. And so I would let the kids pick who got to shoot the free throws. And they picked this one kid, and you had to make, like, I think it was either 5 or 10 free throws. And the kid would, like, go out there and shoot like 90% from the line in practice. And we'd get to games and he'd shoot 10% from the line in games.
Yeah.
And it's because games are not our practice is not the same as games. It's just not at any level, at every level. It's not the same. So when the bullets are real, it changes. So I don't know. I don't know, Brandon. I tell you what. So those are my thoughts. You got a lot of people asking questions. Like, do you want to get to some of these questions? I don't know. Do you ignore your people or do you just?
No, we don't. Usually we have a very, very open, like, especially since the season ended, we just field questions all day. That's what we do. I knew I was having a couple guests on today, so it's been a little bit more structured. But yeah, I mean, a lot of there's more comments than questions. But yeah, we do.
Malachi asked why Alabama plays Mercer, and the answer to that is because that's. I mean, can I swear? Like, that's just a bunch of horse shit.
Yeah, you can swear. Yeah.
I mean, that's like, honestly, the NCAA should ban when they first started, when Michigan played Appalachian State, and I think it was 2 years before that is when the first games took place between FBS and FCS. Mm-hmm. And people figured out, like, hey, we can make a easy buck with a team that doesn't threaten us at all. That was the theory anyway.
Yeah.
And teams started doing it, but you've seen a lot of teams. Like, you don't see many Big Ten teams anymore. I don't know if anybody schedules an FCS opponent.
Maybe I don't think they're allowed to. I think they outlawed that in the Big Ten.
Well, I think what they said was that you can't count it towards like your 6 wins for a bowl berth or something like that.
Maybe that's what
you look at your calendar. I think Minnesota might be the only one that still does it. But Alabama does it, and Georgia does it, and Auburn does it, and all these schools do it. And it's utter junk. They need to get rid of it. Like, they just need to get rid of it. I hate that about college football, and especially the fact that it occurs in week 11.
It's weird. It's weird where they put theirs too. Yeah, like Clemson will play like Wofford or the Citadel in like week 12 or 13. It's like, what the hell? What is this, Mike? I want to use your. I asked you that question obviously jokingly at the beginning because I know. I mean, you know as many people as anybody in this industry, even though you're not technically in it anymore. You do a weekly spot, I think, on Sam Webb's radio show, right? You and I talk all the time. We work together for 5 or 6 years. Like, I know you know your stuff, and I feel like you are as qualified to answer this as anyone. I don't know how much digging you've done. Can you shed any light on the defensive coordinator situation and what Jim Harbaugh might do now that he's back? AJ Cooper from the Facebook page, mentions Klink and Elston. Clinkscale, I believe, is now is it official that he's co-defensive coordinator based on what he did last year? I know he had some things he had to do in order to get that title. But what do you think, man? What's going to happen?
Who's he co-defensive coordinator with?
I guess it would be maybe Elston is the thought, but I don't see that.
I mean, I just think it's funny because I think his title is now co-defensive coordinator.
Yeah, but he's the only one right now. Yeah,
assumes there's somebody else, and right now there's nobody else.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the conversation that Jim Harbaugh had with Steve Clinksale to discuss, like, if there's a guy that moves on, you get promoted to become the defensive coordinator. I would say this, because you and I have talked about this. Even if I don't like how the last week went down, the one thing that you and I both agree is that since December 31st, when they lost to Georgia, Jim Harbaugh has been doing his job at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh has been recruiting. Jim Harbaugh has hired a defensive line coach. A lot of people assumed, and you and I had a lot of back and forth about this, that the moment he hired Elston was a signal that he was staying at Michigan. And you and I said, like, no, he's doing his job. He's doing his job because if he doesn't go to the NFL, he's going to want to come back to the most rosy situation possible. And that means having Mike Elston as the defensive line coach. So, to me, it's like he lost McDonald about, a week ago or so. If it was as easy as Klink is getting promoted, I think we would know that Klink is the defensive coordinator right now. If it was, now maybe like he wants to do interviews with his assistant coaches and he didn't have the time to do that because he was doing his own interviews with the Minnesota Vikings. But I suspect that if you look at Jim Harbaugh's track record, he usually goes outside of Michigan to fulfill a lot of these spots. Sharon Moore's maybe one of the exceptions. Who he promoted to co-offensive coordinator.
I mean, like once they're already there, right?
Yeah,
right.
And I'm like, he went and got Pep Hamilton to be an offensive coordinator. He went and got Josh Gaddis to be an offensive coordinator. He went and got Don Brown. He went and got Mike McDonald. Like, he tends to be someone who goes outside of the program to fill that most important position. And so, he's got a lot of connections. People have brought up like former NFL. The NFL thing, it really takes a special guy to leave the NFL behind and come and coach in college. And look what happened with Mike McDonald. I mean, he did it for 1 year and then he wanted to go back to the NFL. Larry Foote from John. I mean, yeah, it's possible. I guess it depends on, does Larry Foote want to be a defensive coordinator in the NFL? Because if he does, and he has spent his career so far, not in college, he has picked to spend his career in the NFL, right? You go look at his resume, and it doesn't have, I've been at 5 college programs bouncing around, and I just got my NFL shot. He has been in the NFL working that angle. So to me, that says he's an NFL guy. And I think you have to go out and find another defensive coordinator or a defensive coach from college to fill this spot.
I think the most popular opinion was that Larry Foote was going to go with Byron Leftwich, and then Byron Leftwich pulled himself out of the Jaguars job, and it went to Doug Peterson. And so now I think I've been told that Jim Harbaugh gauged interest with Larry Foote, that there was actually a conversation that took place, and that's something that's been discussed. I see people bringing up Vic Fangio because they're friends and they've worked together before, but that's another like NFL lifer guy. I mean, not lifer, but he's been there for a really long time. Some people suggested that, Jim and John would just trade dudes and Wink Martindale's going to come to me. He's another NFL kind of lifer guy. I don't really see that, but yeah, it's going to be interesting now that there's some finality and now that there's some closure to the Harbaugh situation. It's going to be really interesting to see how he heats it up and how he goes after this DC position, because it's really important, man, because Mike McDonald was damn good and they lost a ton of talent off of that unit. So they're going to have to find somebody who really can bring it. And I'm not saying Steve Clinkscale can't or couldn't, but he's never done it before. And it's going to be a tough job in 2022, I think, compared to what it was in 21. I mean, they do have that schedule. They do have that schedule to work out a lot of bugs and get a lot of things figured out in a hurry.
But yeah, to your point, I mean, and I think Chris brought this up earlier. You lost 25 sacks. Michigan has never. I've studied Michigan football for 20 years, pretty intensely. I know almost every major record and stat and they've never lost 25 sacks in a season before, ever. Not even from multiple guys, not even beyond like 2 guys, like 3 guys or 4 guys go.
Like the total amount that,
25 sacks from like a group that has declared. So that's what they're up against right now, and how much that secondary really benefited from the pass rush. In fact, in the 2006 season, when Michigan went down to Ohio State and the number 1 versus number 2, and they lost 42-39. One of the things that got exposed in that game was Michigan's secondary, and that was a great secondary. It had Leon Hall. I think Morgan Trent was the opposite starter. Leon Hall was a first-team All-American that year. Willis Behringer and Brandon Engelman were your safeties. But what happened in that game for the very first time was Michigan's pass rush with Woodley and Branch and Sean Crable come off the edge didn't have a lot of success getting to Troy Smith. And because of that, all of a sudden Troy Smith had time, and boom, whoa, hold on a second. How's our secondary giving up 300 yards passing? Because it was really never that great all year long. It just really benefited from an outstanding pass rush. And I think that's something that happened again this past year, was those quarterbacks were, hey, I don't have a 5-stop drop in my, I don't know if this was Devin Gardner on Sam's show or someone else I followed, but I think someone calculated at one point, they went through and looked at like 4 or 5 games at how many times the quarterbacks took a 3-step, 5-step, and 7-step drop. And like a 7-step drop was like 1% of their snaps. Yeah. And a 5-step drop was like 10% of their snaps. And a 3-step drop was like 85 to 90% of their snaps. And so that was an offense. And those were quarterbacks who were like, we got to get the ball out of here super fast. And if we don't, we're going to get hit. And so when you do that, and the cornerbacks know like, hey, I have to cover the first 15, 20 yards and boom, that's it. Yeah. And so there was a lot of that at play. So it's a big job, and we'll see what, who they get as a defensive coordinator. They need to get a good recruiter. They need to get a guy who can immediately step in and kind of run what Mike McDonald was running, a guy who develops talent. I'm excited about someone like Jalen Harrell, who I think can kind of I don't think he's quite the physical freak that Ojabo was, but we started to see him come on towards the end of the year. He was the guy who was on those rundowns instead of Ojabo, was Jalen Harrell. So can he be a guy that emerges? But who's really the pass rusher that's going to get after it? If you asked me today and said who gets 6 sacks next year, I can't tell you one guy I think gets 6 sacks next year.
Yeah. There's some serviceable bodies, but Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo were not serviceable. They were elite. And so that's a big change. There's no doubt about it. Last one, Mike, and we're going to shut her down too. I finished with you the same way I did with Chris. The basketball team, I mean, one game they, that 3-game winning streak they put together, they shot the lights out from three, like almost 60%, and then I think they shoot 16% from three the other night, like 3 for 19. Maybe that was against Michigan State, and it wasn't much better against Northwestern when they almost lost or what. This team has been so inconsistent, but some of the issues that seem to be there have been there pretty much all year. The poor shooting, Devontae Jones, man, I just don't know what he's giving them at point guard in a lot of stretches. Brandon Johns, I mean, as a senior, has almost disappeared from being effective at all. Is this a tournament team, and what's going on with that basketball team that does have talent but just isn't really putting it together on a night in, night out basis?
No, they won't make the tournament. I don't think there's any chance that they make the tournament, because I agree with Chris where they're going to have to, this Purdue game, they've got Purdue twice in the next three games, twice in the next 5 days, Saturday the 5th and then Thursday the 10th. I mean, that is they're going to take a beating, especially when they have Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday. Man, that is brutal. And I agree with them too that they're going to wear down. Wisconsin away, would be a big win from them if they could get it. Ohio State at home would be a big win from them if they could get it. Illinois, Michigan State. I mean, they've got opportunities, but it's not like they can win one of these and that's going to put them back in the right position. They have to beat all the teams that they're supposed to beat. Penn State, Rutgers. Really, that's the only ones that they're favored in looking at schedule right now. But then they've got to win like 4 more against teams that they're not supposed to beat to even have a chance. I was looking at this earlier. Their defense ranks 11th in the Big Ten, and I think in the 140 range in adjusted defense, according to Ken Palm. I mean, that's as bad as we've ever seen a Michigan basketball team be. And it's Juwan the last couple of years has been a really strong defensive team. And even though John Beilein, people knock him for the defense, for the rebounding, the toughness or something like that. In the last couple of years, like his defenses were really good too. And they're just not playing very well. Devontae Jones, I think that's where it all starts for him. He can't guard anybody off the dribble, right? I mean, and there's so many times watching that Michigan State game, whether it was what are their 2 point guards' name? Hogard and Walker. Yeah. And so, I mean, those guys were beating him off the dribble so much. As soon as they beat him off the dribble, then someone's helping out on defense. And as soon as someone's helping out on defense, those 2 point guards were so good about finding an open man, and that open man was hitting a lot of those 3-pointers or was hitting a 2-pointer. And that just completely got the defense, discombobulated. I think when we came into the year, and I'm not trying to pick on Devontae Jones here, but we came into the year, everybody talked about, finally Michigan has a point guard after Mike Smith and Xavier Simpson, who is an elite offensive player and what he could bring to you offensively. And, oh, by the way, he's like 6'4", and what he's going to be able to do at the rim and all these different things. And we did not spend much time talking about defense and leadership. And I think if you look back on it now, how do Michigan fans feel about Xavier Simpson? I mean, they always really loved him, but now you look back and you're like, dude, like what that guy brought from a leadership and a defensive standpoint. And then Mike Smith, he wasn't a consistent scorer. He wasn't a great 3-point shooter, but what he brought in terms of leadership and defense really set the tone for that team. And when you look at the way that Juwan coaches, you have to have a stopper on the ball. Eli Brooks has been that to some degree, but he is not playing as well as he's capable of this year. And you need really 2 of those guards. And, you bring in, people have been clamoring, more Kobe Buffkin, more Frankie Collins. You bring those guys in. I'm sorry. Like, I like their offense potential, but they're as bad of defensive players as I have seen at Michigan in a really long time. Frankie loses his man constantly. So does Kobe. They can't guard anybody, off the dribble. They're just not very good defensively at all. And so now you've got everybody scrambling. Like I said, Hunter can't protect the rim for that much because he's picking up fouls too often. They're just in a world of hurt. And I'm looking at their schedule here, and I think they've got 19. So they've got 11 more games, and out of those 11 of them, 9 of them are against top 30 opponents according to Ken Palm. So, I mean, 9 games against top 30 opponents. Yikes. I mean, that's they'd have to go 5-4 in those 9 games and win the other 2 against the 2 teams lower than that and finish 7-4, in my opinion, to put themselves in a spot to make it as an at-large team. I just don't see it happening.
I'm writing that down. 7-4. That's the mark they got to get to, and it's got to be, like you said, they're going to have to get some good wins in there, some more quad one wins, some more wins that build the resume up because it's pretty thin right now. They don't. I mean, Indiana, like that's their only real good win, like on the season. Honestly, like they, going to have to get a couple more. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at their wins.
It's not strong. It's not a strong resume.
San Diego State is in the top 40, and Indiana, they've got 2 wins according to Ken Palm against top 50 opponents. 2.
Yeah, that's not a lot. That is not a lot. So, yeah, it's going to be tricky, man. And tomorrow against Purdue, that Purdue team's a monster, dude. I mean, they've got. Dude, that Zach Edey kid, where did they find that kid, dude? Where did they find Zach Edey? He's like 7'5", just an absolute monster.
I don't know.
Ivey's a top 5 pick, probably. Like, yeah, they're a problem, man. They are a problem. Mike, always a pleasure, man. I mean, we talk all the time. This is something we've been discussing. We're like, dude, I need to get you on. We always have these good conversations. Like, we'll have a 15-minute phone conversation. I'm like, that should have been on the podcast. Like, that's how it pretty much goes every time we talk. And I wanted to personally thank you in public here for all the viewers, all the people out there. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for the snowblower. Good God, is that thing a lifesaver, dude? Lifesaver. I mean, I think you gave it to me like, I don't know. It's probably been 2 or 3 winners now.
Yeah.
This is the first time I feel like I really was like, I would have died if I had to try to use a shovel. I would die.
I'm glad to have helped you. Yeah, man, I went and bought myself one of those high tech, the battery powered ones that start every time, and I've got like a 28-inch blade, so it's like massive. And I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my old one. And Brandon Brown was like, hey, I like people just giving me things. So
yeah, well, there was a malfunction. I had to get some repair work done to it, but it was cheap, and now that thing is a machine, dude. I mean, it was a champ. It was a champ. Yeah, CJ, look, man. Hey, if I was out there shoveling today, I either in shape or dead. I mean, one of the two would have happened. A little better shape or dead.
CJ, he gets himself out of shape all the time. I try to bust his ass about this constantly.
Yeah, it's been a thing.
Yeah, because I'll show up and he's just got himself like a new paunch. So,
I got the shirt. I got the double chin. It is what it is, man. We're all just trying to make it. Yep. We're all just trying to make it. Mike, thanks so much, man. I know we'll talk again soon. I don't know if it'll be on the pod again, but always appreciate the insights. And say hello to the fam. Give that little guy a noogie for me, man, over there. How's he doing, dude? Everything cool with little John?
He's great. I just heard him wake up about 20 minutes ago, so I'm going to go play with him a little bit. And you know what I'm going to do, Brandon? As soon as I'm going to do a little bit of work, and then I'm going to actually work out. I like to stay in shape. So I'm
going to go eat a pizza. All right, man. Everybody out there, thanks for listening. Appreciate you.